The retirement order came through on a Tuesday. I know because I had been eating a cold lunch at the monitoring station when the administrative packet arrived, and I read it twice without particularly understanding it, and then I went back to eating the lunch. That was 6 months ago. I had not yet logged out of the duty roster. It was an oversight. That is what I told myself the first week, and the second, and the fifth. The channel would not close itself. The system required a manual confirmation code from the duty officer on record, and the duty officer on record had simply continued to show up each morning, plug in and listen. Channel 4 Foxtrot 9 was a decommissioned Terran emergency monitoring frequency. It had been decommissioned 11 years prior when the Velhari Intercessory Compact, a trade and mutual aid agreement Earth had quietly co-signed during the expansion period, was formally dissolved by the Compact's own governing council. The Velhari had been perfectly cordial about it. They had thanked Earth for the 30-year partnership, filed the dissolution through proper diplomatic channels, and moved their emergency infrastructure to their own ancestral relay network, which had been operating continuously for longer than Earth had maintained written records. They did not need our frequency. Nobody did. 4 Foxtrot 9 was, according to the decommissioned paperwork, a dead channel. I had continued to monitor it, because I am constitutionally incapable of leaving a channel silent when I am the one responsible for it. I had monitored it through the dissolution. I had monitored it through my transfer to the depot station. 3. I had monitored it through the retirement order, and through 6 months of cold lunches at a desk nobody had officially assigned to me. At 0312 hours on the 37th day of the 7th month, something came through on 4 Foxtrot 9. I almost missed it. The signal was badly degraded. It had been traveling for what my diagnostic overlay estimated at several hours before it found anything to bounce off of. And what it had bounced off of was a defunct relay transponder on the outer edge of Sector 12 that I had flagged for decommission 3 years earlier, and which had never actually been decommissioned. Apparently the theme was consistent. I ran the decode twice. The second decode matched the first. It was a Velhari Council emergency beacon, a specific type of burst signal their governing councils used when a colony installation was under active threat, and the council had determined that normal communications channels were compromised or unavailable. The beacon did not include coordinates. It included a colony registry identifier. I cross-referenced against the compact archives in 14 seconds, and a threat type code, which I recognized without cross-referencing, because I had been monitoring Velhari emergency traffic for 30 years. And some things you simply remember. The threat type was siege, active interdiction by an armed force, civilian population at risk. Sat with that for approximately 4 seconds. The beacon had not been aimed at me. I understood that immediately. The Velhari Ancestral Relay Network was their infrastructure. Their council emergency beacons were designed to travel that network, to reach their own emergency response apparatus, their own fleet, their own authorities. Whatever had happened at the registry colony. Velhari Settlement Oran Keth, 91,000 registered residents, agricultural and medical processing hub. The council's beacon had been aimed at Velhari ears. The fact that it had reached me meant the ancestral relay network had failed to receive it, which meant the relay network had failed, which meant the colony was beyond the reach of their own emergency infrastructure. I was not supposed to be at this desk. I was not supposed to be logged into this channel. I was not technically an active duty officer. I pulled up the depot manifest and looked at what we had. The Meridian Coast was a Terran patrol corvette on maintenance hold. She had been sitting in our secondary bay for 6 weeks, awaiting a propulsion calibration that had been delayed twice by parts supply issues. The calibration was, as of my last review, approximately 90% complete. Her weapons systems were fully operational. Medical bay was stocked. Her crew complement was partial. A skeleton watch rotation, 17 people. Because most of her company had been given leave rotation during the maintenance hold. I opened a channel to the watch commander. "This is Monitoring Officer Halveth on 4 Foxtrot 9, I said. "I have a Velhari colony beacon, siege designation, registry Oran Keth. I need Meridian Coast underway in 30 minutes. There was a pause, a brief one. The watch commander was young, I did not know her name, told me she had joined the rotation after my retirement order. But she did not ask me to repeat myself or question my authority, quest or point out that I was technically not on the active roster. She said, 30 minutes. I boarded with the watch crew. Nobody told me not to. We reached Oranketh in 11 hours. The propulsion calibration being only 90% complete was a factor. I spent most of the transit in the comms bay, trying to raise any Velhari channel that was still live, getting silence on most of them, and fragmented burst traffic on 2 others that I could not fully decode, but which carried enough clear content for me to understand the general shape of the situation. The Orvanthi Reclamation Authority had moved on the colony 7 days before our arrival. The Orvanthi had a long-standing territorial claim on the Oranketh system, the kind of claim that had been disputed in compact councils for decades, the kind of claim that, when a mutual aid compact dissolved and left a colony without external backing, became the kind of claim that got enforced with ships. They had 4 frigates in stationary interdiction above the colony's primary landing fields. They were not bombarding, they were blockading, cutting supply lines, preventing evacuation, negotiating the colony's formal cession as a precondition for lifting the blockade. The colony had been without resupply for 7 days. The Velhari ancestral relay network, it transpired, had suffered a cascade failure in the sector 3 days prior, a separate, unrelated infrastructure failure that had stranded Oranketh's beacon in silence. Except it had reached 4 Foxtrot 9, because 4 Foxtrot 9 had never been properly closed. We dropped out of transit at the system's edge, and I had Meridian Coast hold position while I composed a formal signal. There is a way to do this and a way not to do it. I had been in this kind of situation, adjacent to this kind of situation, enough times to know the shape of what was needed. The Orvanthi Reclamation Authority was not, by any legal definition I was aware of, a party to any active agreement with Earth. The Velhari Compact was dissolved. We had no treaty basis, no formal mandate, no jurisdictional standing. What we had was 1 partial crew patrol corvette, a decommissioned monitoring frequency, and a duty officer who had not logged out. I transmitted on the Orvanthi's active interdiction channel, which I had pulled from the burst traffic. This is Terran monitoring vessel Meridian Coast, duty officer Halveth, to Orvanthi Reclamation Authority vessels in Oranketh system. I have received a distress beacon from Velhari Colony Oranketh, filed under Terran Emergency Monitoring Protocol 4 Foxtrot 9, which remains an active Terran registered emergency channel. We are responding to that beacon. We are requesting immediate confirmation that no active hostilities are in progress against civilian installations, requesting that resupply access to the colony be restored pending a review of territorial status. Please respond. I waited. 17 minutes later, I got a response. The Orvanthi commander's name was Seveth Oral Kadeen. I know this because she introduced herself formally, which I appreciated. She informed me that the Velhari Terran intercessory compact had been dissolved, which I confirmed that I was aware of. She informed me that Earth had no standing in this system, which I agreed was a reasonable position. She asked, with what I read as genuine curiosity rather than hostility, why a Terran vessel had appeared in the system at all. I told her the truth. The channel had not been closed. The beacon had been aimed at the Velhari relay network, which had failed. The signal had drifted and reached a decommissioned Terran monitoring frequency that was still technically active, because the duty officer on record had not submitted her logout confirmation. Earth had no claim on this system. I had no authority to contest the Orvanthi's territorial proceedings. What I had was a distress beacon on an active Terran channel and a protocol obligation to respond to active distress beacons on active Terran channels. There was a longer pause this time. What followed was not a negotiation exactly. It was more like a technical discussion. The Orvanthi had not, in their planning, accounted for an Earth vessel appearing in response to a Velhari beacon, because under any reasonable reading of the situation, there was no mechanism by which an Earth vessel should have appeared. The compact was dissolved. The Velhari had no Earth backing. The colony had no claim on Terran emergency response services. Every step in the chain that had brought me here was a closed channel, a failed relay, a retirement paperwork oversight. And yet, Seventh Oral Kadeen asked me what I intended to do. I told her I intended to sit here, at the edge of the system, monitoring 4 Foxtrot 9, until the beacon was no longer active. A beacon remained active, under Terran monitoring protocol, until the distress condition was resolved, and the Colony Council transmitted a formal all-clear. I did not know how long that would take. Prepared to wait. She asked me if I had additional vessels behind me. I told her I had one partial crew patrol corvette and a propulsion calibration that was 90% complete. There was a very long pause. I do not know, and will not claim to know, what reasoning Sevath Oral Kadeen applied in the 38 minutes that followed. I know that Earth was not a threat to her 4 frigates. I know that her territorial claim was legally sound, and that I had no standing to contest it. I know that she had every practical reason to simply run me off and continue the blockade. What I know is what she did, was to open resupply corridors to the colony, and request that I transmit a formal Terran monitoring record of the situation for deposit with Compact Settlement Archive. She wanted it on record that her vessels had cooperated with an active Terran emergency response. She wanted the paper. I transmitted it. The resupply corridors opened. The colony received its first inbound ships in 7 days. Meridian Coast stood off at the system edge and monitored 4 Foxtrot 9. And I sat in the comms bay with bad coffee from the watch crew's galley and watched the supply traffic move and thought about what it meant that a defunct compact could reach across an 11-year silence and pull one inattentive monitoring officer out of retirement. We were not in time to undo the 7 days. There had been rationing, there had been medical cases that should have been evacuated earlier than they were. When I walked the landing field the next morning while the resupply convoys were still coming in, Colony Council aide who met me, a woman named Orath Velsunai, who had been the original treaty aide during the compact signing and who had outlasted the compact itself, looked at me for a long moment before she said anything. She said in standard Velhari, which I had learned 30 years ago and had kept current because I am constitutionally incapable of letting a skill lapse. We did not send the beacon to you. I know, I said. The network failed. I know. She looked at Meridian Coast, sitting on the landing apron with her maintenance panels still half open and her propulsion calibration still technically incomplete. You are one ship, she said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. The supply convoys were running behind her, and the morning light was yellow-gray through the agricultural haze. 7 days of blockade had not broken the colony. It had reduced it. There was a difference, and both of us could see it, and neither of us looked away from it. You are one ship, she said again, and the channel was closed. The channel, I said, was not closed. She looked at me. She did not slow headshake or go wide-eyed or make any of the gestures people make in stories when they are experiencing a revelation. She just looked at me with the particular expression of someone who is revising an arithmetic problem and finding that the answer is not what they budgeted for. Then she nodded once and walked with me toward the field office, and we began the documentation. I filed my monitoring report the following week. The report noted, in the appropriate fields, that channel 4 Foxtrot 9 remained active at time of incident due to an incomplete decommission process, and that monitoring under the channel had enabled response to a distress beacon that would otherwise have gone unrequisited. The report recommended, in the recommendations field, that the formal log-out process for decommissioned channels include a mandatory system-side confirmation in addition to duty officer confirmation to prevent future ambiguity. In the same field, in the same report, I recommended that 4 Foxtrot 9 not be closed until the Orvanthi territorial settlement was complete and Orenketh's resupply situation was fully normalized. The report was filed. The recommendation was reviewed. The channel remained open. I remained on the duty roster. Nobody sent me a new retirement order, and I did not ask about it.